ready to present at the getting ready to start the peak performance. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Savvy Sales Lady Live. I almost forgot my own intro. This is Kristine Harrington, the Savvy Sales Lady. And as many of you know and have reached out to me, my little Grishka, who always sat right back there, laid back there during our broadcast, she passed away over the weekend. And I got to tell you, it was rough. It's been rough. It still is rough. For any of you that have had pets that passed away, you know exactly what it is I'm going through. And every day I'm thankful for that little puppy that came into our lives. Even though she was 6 years old, she still acted like a puppy. And you know, she was my little puppy that stayed with me. But to transition to our guest, and I want to introduce her to you. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Kristine Christlieb. She is a veteran fundraiser who has thought a lot about the similarities and differences between being in fundraising and in being in sales. And full disclosure, her and I used to work together a couple of years ago, and she has some important announcements to make today. So let me bring her in. Hey. Hello, Kristine. Thank you for being on.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Kristine.
You are welcome. And Kristine, to start off, tell us a little bit about your background. Give the audience kind of an overview of your history, because you really are an expert when it comes to nonprofit and fundraising. So I'm going to let you tell the audience all about you.
Well, let me see if I can do that as quickly as possible. I started out in fundraising as a grant writer. Actually, I was hired by St. Mary's University, in Notre Dame, Indiana, the women's side of Notre Dame. I was hired to write their case statement. And at the time, I was just a freelance writer. And I didn't know anything I didn't know what a case statement was. I was very familiar with higher education because of my graduate work and so on. But I didn't know anything about fundraising. So I wrote their case statement, and then I was hired by the Sisters of the Holy Cross to be a grant writer for their healthcare system. So that was my very first official job in fundraising, and it was in healthcare. So I went from there to a little college in northern Missouri that went bankrupt. So that was my second job in fundraising. But then I moved to Texas and got a job with a very exclusive Methodist college in Central Texas that, had sort of an embarrassment of riches. And I became a major gift officer there. And that's really where my career as a major gift officer and plan giving officer began. And that's what I did for, 25 years. So when I say I was in fundraising, I do feel like I want to make the distinction that I was in major gifts and planned giving. So I was looking for gifts primarily at the 6 and 7 figure level.
Okay, so you were up there then, working with perhaps CEOs of companies and of universities, things like that, Kristine?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't really want to get off topic too much, but when you're a major gift officer, you're actually like a third level down. So the president of the university, they were working with the CEOs. then my boss at a VP level was working at the next level of donors. So I was actually third level down. And even though I was third level down, I was still looking for those gifts at the 6 and 7 figure level. And I should say that most of my experience has been in higher education at the university level. Well, that's what higher education means. In higher education and in healthcare. And just for your audiences, for people who are interested in the profession, those are the two segments of fundraising, healthcare and higher education. They typically have the highest salaries. So you'll be paid less of a fundraiser if you're in social services or if you're in the arts or so on. But if you're in healthcare, especially healthcare gets paid the most. Yeah.
Well, what started you down the road of comparing fundraising and sales?
Well, this is kind of an interesting story in that both my undergraduate and my graduate degrees are from the University of Nebraska. And so I used to regularly look in the Chronicle of Higher Education, where they used to post jobs, for fundraising jobs at the University of Nebraska, because I really would have, both my husband and I at the time would have loved to have returned to Nebraska. And so in one of the job postings, the foundation, the University of Nebraska Foundation, said that they were actually looking for experienced salespeople. They weren't looking for people with experience in fundraising. They wanted salespeople. And so that was a little bit alarming to me. I thought, oh my gosh, I don't really want to, I'm not sure I want to work in a sales environment, which kind of leads me to talk about one of the key differences in sales versus fundraising is that for the most part in fundraising, you don't really have dollar goals. When I was at Washington University, that was my most recent posting in fundraising, I did have a dollar goal and I had visit goals. That was the first time in my career that I'd had a dollar goal in fundraising. Does that surprise you, Kristine?
It actually doesn't. Because
Really?
what would be the point if there wasn't a goal? But what might be surprising to you is how many times I have trained sales teams where the sales manager never gave them sales goals. And that just like, what? Because if you don't have a target to shoot for, chances are you'll shoot yourself in the foot instead. So,
Well, or if you're like me, sort of neurotic a little bit, then you don't have a goal, and nobody's telling you if you're doing well or not, you really have no idea. If you're doing your job or not, have I raised enough money? You have no idea without a goal. So I think now maybe that's changed, and maybe it's different, like at top universities like Washington University. I'm sure it's changed over the years, but when I started in fundraising, I never had a goal, and it was kind of disturbing.
yeah, right, right. I can understand why. Well, what do you think are similar roles and maybe interchangeable roles between sales and fundraising? And oh,
Yeah,
by the way, before you answer that,
yeah.
um, Kirsten is on. She says good afternoon.
Okay.
And she also extended her condolences for little Grishka. Thank you, Kirsten. I really appreciate you. So, what do you think is interchangeable and similar?
Okay. Well, the first thing I would say is that if you are in sales or you're in fundraising, you have to be expert in establishing rapport with another person as quickly as possible. So I know that from the work you do, Kristine, that's one of the things that you teach your clients is even on that initial phone call, you are building rapport and trust. So those are that's at least one thing that's very, very similar. And so you build trust in different ways in fundraising than in sales. So for example, in fundraising, what you're selling is the credibility and the mission of the organization. So that's kind of similar, but in both cases, whether you're in sales or whether you're in fundraising, you're leading someone toward writing a check, or getting out their debit card, or whatever it is we want to say today. But you get the point.
Closing the deal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
closing the deal by paying for it. So,
Exactly.
would you encourage salespeople then to look at fundraising as an option or a different opportunity?
Absolutely. I absolutely would say so. And I would encourage someone, if you're interested in staying in sort of a people environment, where you're with people, that's a good option for you. So especially I would look at any organization maybe that you personally support financially, and reach out to them. Or the next step would be to reach out to an organization that that you admire and that you've thought about supporting. Because what you would want to do is to pitch yourself as someone who has that skill of establishing rapport and building trust, and you have an admiration for the mission of the organization. I think that's a pretty powerful way to position yourself in that career path.
Well, I'd like to segue into your new venture,
Oh, mhm.
trust but verify, and I'm going to put that up right now. That is your new Substack, Trust But Verify. Uh,
Yeah.
why don't you tell us a little bit about this? And what I'm also going to do is, let me do this first. So hold on.
You bet.
I am, doing this all alone. So here it is right there. This is Trust But Verify. And this was posted on June 12th, and your announcement about what you're going to be doing. So Kristine, why don't you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah.
And it's on Substack.
Yeah. So if you go to Substack and in the search window, you just put Trust But Verify, my Substack will come up. And the purpose of the Substack is really to fill a gap that I've noticed over my career, that there is even though the nonprofit sector is a huge part of the American economy, it's the third largest private employer, as a matter of fact, that it gets very, very little scrutiny from the press or from government regulators. So, like, all kinds of sort of bizarre things can go on in nonprofit organizations. And so, my writing and my reporting is going to be toward donors, for example, letting them know what are the circumstances under which you should give to endowment, or maybe you shouldn't give to endowment at all. And to board members, how to be a good board member, what's expected of you, and to as well as to the nonprofits themselves, urging them to be as transparent as possible. And that really is my message: transparency. Using actually using transparency to persuade donors to support your organization and to build trust, that trust that we've been talking about.
We have seen quite a few abuses in the nonprofit world, nationally and in our little Catholic world. Do you care to comment on those, Kristine?
Well, I can raise a few. I think maybe one that most people would be familiar with is James O'Keefe at Project Veritas. Mr. O'Keefe was the founder of that organization, and it really took off under his leadership. But naturally, there were, his management style was criticized. His The expenses that he accrued, especially recently, were criticized until ultimately he was asked to resign by his board. Now, that is so common, and I could go off on that. It's called founders syndrome, where someone who founds an organization sort of feels like they own the place, and then they begin to abuse. Their management style gets out of control, their use of funds gets out of control, and so on. So that's happened with James O'Keefe. On In the Christian world, and here in the United States, there have been like 3 very serious situations with nonprofit organizations with whistleblowers complaining about sexual harassment in the workplace. And because at least in some cases, there haven't been whistleblower policies, it's really gotten out of control. So they had a problem, for example, at what's Bishop Robert Barron's The Word on Fire.
Yes, Word on Fire.
Mm-hmm. There was a problem there. There was a problem at Christianity Today. And oh gosh, I had a third one in mind and it's just slipped my mind. But at least those 2 had sexual harassment charges. So management is an issue in a lot of nonprofit organizations. Board members don't know how to evaluate the CEO. Governance issues pop up. It's kind of a free-for-all. It's a little like the Wild West out there, in my opinion.
I agree with you. I mean, as I have shared with you privately, I was on a board for a Catholic organization here locally. And even after we voted on the bylaws and everything, the woman that was running it just did whatever she wanted. I mean, she did not consult with the other board members. After she was adamant about voting for the bylaws, she then turned around and totally disregarded the bylaws. And it seems to me that's pretty prevalent.
Yeah, it really is. Actually, one of the best organizations I was ever associated with, I was actually a board member on, and it wasn't a great organization because I was a board member. That's not what I learned a lot from being a board member. It was on Shakespeare Dallas, and so some organizations, it can be run pretty well. I really think it depends on the board members really taking a sense of responsibility, and they have what's called a duty of care, and they can be found negligent if they're not paying attention. I was just reading an article the other day about how to get your board member. It was to chief executive officers. I'm sorry, my phone just went off.
That's okay.
Can you hear it? Anyway,
it's okay, Kristine. You can let it ring.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Oh, there it went. The chief executive officer was complaining about the fact that board members would never read the board reports. I'm like, what? I mean, that's the sort of thing that happens. Can you imagine accepting a position on a board and not reading the board reports? But
exactly.
It's common.
So, tell me more about the connection between Trust But Verify and your fundraising services. And also, I want to put up, this is your website, KristineChristlieb.com.
Yes.
Your new website, which connects all of this together, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Well, I would say what connects them is that I'm advocating transparency on both sides. So I'm advocating transparency for the nonprofits, that they need to be transparent. And then I'm also suggesting that transparency is a fundraising strategy that can really help people, that can really move donors toward writing that check. And so what I'm talking about is, and Kristine, I'm sure you're aware of this, but a lot of times, especially in wealthy nonprofit organizations like healthcare and higher education, in which I worked, there would be these elaborate brochures and publications. I remember the case statement that we did for the little university that I was with in Texas. I think they were $50 a piece. That was the cost of producing that case statement. It was an oversized, glossy thing. I'm not advocating that at all. I think instead, the better thing to do, especially in smaller organizations, is take your operating budget, take just a copy of your projected expenses and use that to talk to a donor about the needs of the organization and what your aspirations are, but what it would cost. And I think that's and just open that up to them. Here's what we're spending, and let that do the work.
Sometimes I think those glossy portfolios that they pass out is just, people look at that, they don't read it.
No.
And it's like, oh, they must be doing well. They must be, on target here, because look at the glossy. It's like flash the shiny object in front of them.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. This is my last question before I give you the final word.
Yeah.
Why should the average person care?
Well, I think Americans are amazingly generous, and they do a lot to support charitable organizations. So part of my message is be smart in your giving. Check out those organizations. Look at their annual tax filing. It's called a 990. And you can see those on a website called GuideStar. You can look, and most charities post their 990s on GuideStar. And if they don't, they are legally bound to supply their most recent 990 if you request it. So look at those 990s. Look at those. The salaries are posted on the top employees. You can see how much they're spending, and really scrutinize that and ask questions. So at a very foundational level, I'm just encouraging people, especially wealthy people, to be wealthy and wise in how they make their charitable gifts.
Well, that's good advice, Kristine. Any parting words or anything I should have asked that I didn't?
Well, I would just encourage people to, a lot of people are involved in nonprofit organizations, either as volunteers or, you make gifts to charitable organizations. So I'm just urging everyone to scrutinize those organizations and hold them accountable, because accountability is so important to our country right now. It's, it's trust is hard to find. And the more we can build trust in our institutions, the stronger our country will be.
Which is why you say trust, but verify.
Exactly.
I love that. What you're calling your Substack, Kristine, because not enough verification is being done. One thing that I listen to Glenn Beck all the time. I love Glenn Beck. Sorry for those of you that don't like Glenn Beck. I do. But he's always saying, don't take my word for it. Do your own research.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, we can, there are certain podcasters and reporters that we come to trust. Okay. And so we don't have to check every little thing they do, but we should, look into what people are trying to tell us. I mean, it's just important right now.
Well, the one thing we didn't touch upon, and we've got about 5 minutes before we're in 30 minutes. So I appreciate you staying on, Kristine.
Yeah.
One thing we didn't touch upon that we should mention is everyone, Kristine was a reporter. She came from a reporting background as well, which we haven't talked about.
Oh, yeah.
And let me just say that she's a very good reporter. If you saw her work, which one of these days I'm going to keep prodding you to put them all on YouTube, Kristine. She does her homework and is very good at verifying information. So once a reporter, always a reporter. And that's what you can expect her to bring to Trust But Verify, is that investigative reporter spirit.
You'll always find the links. I'll always provide the links.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Kristine, thank you for being on.
Oh,
and
thank you, Kristine.
yeah, and everyone check her out on KristineChristlieb.com. It's scrolling below. And her Substack, Trust But Verify. How else can they follow you, Kristine?
I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Gab. And let's see, where else am I? Facebook.
Is that under your
LinkedIn.
name?
I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find me on Gab, Twitter, and LinkedIn as Kristine Christlieb. On Facebook, I'm Kristine Edson Christlieb. So.
Okay, great. Good to know. Good to know. And I always end the podcast this way, Kristine, because now some of you may be watching this and going, what does this have to do with sales? Everything comes down to sales, whether you're selling a product or whether you're selling your child to go to bed when he's supposed to. It all comes down to skills you need in sales. And I've always said, Kristine, if you can master sales, you can master life.
That sounds right to me.
Yeah, yeah. So everyone remember, sales is a journey, not a quick trip around the block. And I'll see you next Tuesday at 2 p.m. on Facebook and on YouTube and LinkedIn Live. Bye-bye.